Hi, I'm Rob, creator of the Outersect Modeler. There are no samples in the sounds you're hearing. These sounds are created by mathematical models of acoustic and electroacoustic instruments. I made the modeler because I wanted a synthesizer with all the nuances and expression possibilities of acoustic instruments, with so many ways to play the same note that it's impossible to sample them all. The modeler can completely hold the listener's attention, taking center stage in a musical composition the same way a vocal, an electric guitar lead, or a violin solo can. Here's how you can create your own sounds with it. You'll want to audition the preset sounds at some point. The easiest way to do that is to hit the next sound and previous sound button in the sound selector area in the upper left. Or you can hit the Browse button to bring up the sound browser and browse sounds by category. To save a sound, you can hit the Save button in the upper left-hand corner. Or if you have the sound browser up, you could hit the Save As button there. Decide on your new sound's name, hit save, and your sound is saved. The resonator simulates a vibrating object like the strings of a guitar or the metal tube of a trumpet. Decay controls how long the resonator sounds after it's plucked. At decay of 0, the resonator is silent. As you turn decay up, you get longer and longer sustaining tones. Turning damping down makes higher frequencies die away faster. Dispersion changes the vibration from open to closed. Open is similar to a square wave, while closed is like a sawtooth. Distortion adds an overdriven tube amp effect. Compander is a compressor expander. At medium levels of compander and decay, a pluck tone can sustain forever. At high levels, compander also distorts. Harmonic and harmonic mix work together to create touch harmonic effects. They can also create effects that aren't found on physical instruments. Feedback harmonic, feedback, and the Q button work together to simulate feedback on electrified acoustic instruments like electric guitar. Transpose, tune, and volume do exactly what you would expect. Transpose changes the tuning in semitones. Tune changes it in sense. And volume changes the loudness. The pick simulates plucking a guitar string or any other pluck string instrument. Level controls the pick loudness. Shape describes how rounded, pointy, soft, or hard the pick is. Warp warps the pick shape in physically impossible ways. If you want a realistic pick, leave warp at 1. Position controls where on the string the pluck happens. Noise is the amount of white noise added to the pick. Notice that pick noise and pick level are independent. Notice also that warp and shape do not affect pick noise, but position does. If you want the pick completely off, set level and noise to 0. Now that we understand the resonator and the pick, we can create expressive pluck string sounds. Start by making the string hold longer when the key is down and cut off quickly when the key is released. To do that, I click on the gate modulation source, then take this virtual patch cable over to the resonator decay knob, grab that knob and turn it the way I normally would, and that sets the initial modulation amount. I can always adjust that amount later using the little knob on the patch cord. So now the sound holds for a long time while I hold the key down and dies away pretty quickly when I let the key up. I want it to die away more quickly than that, so I'm going to reduce decay even further. Okay, that's about right. I also want the sound to be velocity sensitive. So first I'm going to turn this pick level way, way down, almost to 0. That's my lowest velocity level. I'm going to modulate that with velocity here. Same thing I just did with gate. Let it control almost the whole pick level. Okay, I also want velocity to change the tone and not just change the loudness. So I'm also going to modulate shape and position and also add just a little bit of noise on velocity. Got a pretty expressive pluck string sound. I want to play some hammer-ons and pedal steel type bends, so I'm going to turn pitch bend sus mode on. That makes the pitch bender only apply to notes that are held down on the keyboard and not to notes that are sounding because of the sustain pedal or any other reason. That lets me play things like this. If I tried to play the same thing with sus mode off, it would sound kind of like this. So that's our first pluck string sound. Now you might have noticed that if you want to see modulations from any modulation source, you just mouse over the source and they show up. If you want to see modulations going to a destination, mouse over the destination and they show up. And when you start doing a new modulation, all the modulations show up. Let's improve our pluck string sound even more. I'll use the mod wheel to move the pick position from the neck towards the bridge by quite a bit. The mod wheel now changes the overall tone quite a lot. I'm going to use pressure to bring in feedback. And use the mod wheel to also change the feedback harmonic. Now let's add some harmonics on knob 1. To make that really jump out, I'm going to add some Compander also on knob 1 and bring up the volume when I do that. Okay. We have seen what the resonator and the pick can do by themselves. So now let's talk about brass, reed, and bow. Pick hits the resonator once when a note starts, then goes away. Brass, reed, and bow just keep pushing as long as you want. Let's start with brass because it's the simplest. Pressure controls how hard the player is blowing into the mouthpiece. Position controls the tension on the player's lips. It has a strong tendency to jump harmonics. That's what brass players use it for. Growl controls the intensity of the growl in the player's throat as they play. Growling on wind instruments like brass and reed means the player is humming or singing a note into the mouthpiece as they play. It's usually not the same note they're playing. It might be out of tune with that note. You can apply the growl to both brass and reed. The reed is very similar to brass. Pressure again controls how hard the player is blowing. Position emphasizes higher harmonics, but doesn't tend to jump harmonics the same way brass does. Shape simulates physical properties of the reed. Growl is the same for reed and brass, although reed shape affects its growl response. The bow is complicated. Pressure is how hard the bow is pressing into the string. speed is how fast the bow is moving across the string. So to make the bow sound, you have to turn up both pressure and speed. Bow position is the same as pick position. It's where the bow is sitting on the string. Turning position up emphasizes higher harmonics. In fact, if you look at the top center display right now where it says bow position, that number underneath it is telling you exactly which harmonic the bow position is emphasizing. I'm going to set it to emphasize the fifth harmonic. Okay, so now it's right on the fifth harmonic, and it's going to make it really easy to jump to that harmonic by squeaky bow accident. Now, width is how wide the bow is relative to the length of the string. You can think of width as smearing position out over a wider area. Turning width up tends to emphasize the fundamental more than the bow harmonic. Turning it down tends to emphasize that bow harmonic more. Reflection is how much sound is bouncing off of the bow. A positive reflection value tends to emphasize the bow harmonic. Right now I'm going to try to make the bow sound jump completely to the fifth harmonic. Okay, now you hear that the bow the fundamental is gone and it's just playing the fifth at this point. If the bow's speed is 0, but the bow has pressure, the bow changes the sound of the resonator. It's like a string with a violin bow that's not moving, pushing down on it. I switched to a pick sound so you can hear this. If reflection is 0, increasing bow pressure just deadens the string, reducing resonator decay. As you turn reflection up, the bow starts to act like a resonator harmonic. Unlike resonator harmonics, though, the bow isn't limited to integer position, so you can get in between spots. So you can use bow with speed and pressure to make a sound, or you can use bow without speed but with pressure to change a sound. The body has 6 bands of fully parametric EQ, a low-pass filter, and a high-pass filter. Its purpose is to simulate the resonances of acoustic instrument bodies. It can be used for other things, of course, but that's why it's here and why it's more complicated than most synth filters. If you've worked with parametric equalizers in your DAW, though, this should be familiar territory. To select a band, you can either click on an icon at the bottom or click on the same colored icon inside the frequency response graph. Double-clicking an icon inside the graph will toggle the enable switch for that band, turning it on or off. Left dragging in the frequency response graph will change the frequency and the gain for that band. Right dragging with the right button, will change the Q or bandwidth and gain for that band. You can also just adjust these with the sliders on the edges of the graph. The parametric bands give you plus or minus 24 dB of gain. Q ranges from 0.2, which is the whole audio range, up to 100, which is just a tiny, tiny, narrow little band. And the frequency range is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. The highest and lowest parametric band can be toggled between parametric mode, and high and low shelf mode. The high one goes to high shelf, low one goes to low shelf. The low pass and high pass filter slopes vary from 12 dB per octave to 96 dB per octave. So you can really brick wall with these if you want to. Since this is a synthesizer, most of these parameters can be modulated by any modulation source. Let's try modulating this parametric frequency from LFO2. There are a lot of different parameters in the body, and setting up a good body can take some time. Once you've done it, you might want to use the same body settings on many different sounds, or at least try them. These save and load buttons let you save and load the body separately from everything else in your sound. Let's try a few. So here's a vowel simulation. It simulates going from something that sounds kind of like an E to something that sounds kind of like an oo or an o. Using knob 1. Here's a synthesizer type filter. This is a 24 dB per octave low pass Moog style filter with the cutoff on knob 1 and the resonance on knob 2. Now, if you happen to set up a body this way, you can still modulate it from other things like the envelope. In fact, you can do it pretty easily. Let's route envelope 3 to knob 1, and that will change the cutoff. We can still set the bass frequency here, like we often do with a mini Moog or something of that nature. And the envelope still applies. You might notice, though, that let's say I hold down a chord here and then hit a low note. That filter is applying to all the notes that are being held down, not just the last note I hit. That's because there's only one body. It's not one per voice, it's one for all the voices. If you want a per voice low pass filter, that's back over here in the resonator section. It's called damping. If you want a per voice high pass filter, also over here in the resonator section, you can use harmonic and harmonic mix to do stuff like that. We've used envelopes and LFOs in a couple of our examples already. I assume everybody has a basic understanding of them since they've been around for more than 50 years now. There are a couple of things that are different about these envelopes and LFOs, though. None of these envelopes and LFOs connect directly to anything. There's no hardwired amplitude or filter envelope. That's because you don't need envelopes at all for lots of physical models. This Pluck string you're hearing right now, for example, doesn't use any. The envelopes are DAHDSR type. That's delay, attack, hold, decay, sustain, release. I find those handiest for physical modeling. Let's say I want to start with a pick, the way this sound does now. Let that sound for a little bit, then bring in a bow. The delay segment is great for that. So I'm going to connect envelope 1 to the bow, both speed and pressure. Now the pick and the bow are coming in together. That's not what I want. I want this. A distinct pick followed by a bow swell. Okay, great. Now let's say I don't want to use a pick at all. Instead, I want to use the bow the way I would use a pick. So I want the bow to come in hard for just a second, then go away completely and let the resonator sustain it. Now I could do that sort of with attack and decay, but I don't really get a lot at that peak. So what I want is this. That's more like it. Okay, all the envelopes and LFOs also have level sliders on their left side, so we can scale or even invert them with that. Let's say I wanted to make that sound velocity sensitive. One thing I could do is turn the envelope way down, so it's almost dead silent, and then scale it with velocity, and that will make it velocity sensitive. Let's say I want a traditional mod wheel type sound where the mod wheel brings in a vibrato. Okay, I'm going to connect LFO1 to tuning, and that's going to create my vibrato. Okay, great. That's way too much, and I don't want it until the modulation wheel brings it in. So I'm going to start by turning this down to 0. And I'm using the control key to get really precise control to get it exactly to 0. Okay. So now that vibrato is gone, I'm going to connect the LFO1 to the modulation wheel. And now the vibrato comes in when I bring the modulation wheel up. The pickup section simulates the pickups on an electrified string instrument like electric guitar. It's a comb filtering effect, which can create strong formants that affect the overall tone quite a bit. The image control pans the pickups left and right to create a stereo image. The delay effect is true stereo with ping pong, X-cross, and stereo feedback modes. There are high and low pass filters in the feedback signal chain. The chorus is stereo with positive and negative feedback. Setting depth higher than rate intensifies the effect. Setting depth lower than rate minimizes it. The reverb is stereo and sounds quite nice. Predelay delays the onset of the reverb. Reflections control the level of early reverb echoes. These are also spread out by predelay. time is the reverb time. How long does it take for the reverb to decay? Size controls the resonant frequency of the space. The more size, the lower those frequencies are. Damping reduces high frequency resonances. There's also high pass and low pass filters on the reverb signal. I assume everybody knows what output volume does, right? It turns everything up and down. There's also an output limit, which sets the maximum level the output won't go above, no matter where the volume is set, no matter what you play. Portamento controls glide time between notes. With Portamento off, it never glides between notes. With Portamento set to auto, it will only glide if there's a note already down. And with Portamento on, it always glides between notes. Legato controls note attack. In monophonic sounds like this one, it means the note won't have a new attack if you play smoothly. You only get a new attack when you play disconnected notes. Legato off, you always get a new attack. Pitch bend is the amount of pitch bend. I like to leave it on 2, but some people might want to have, I don't know, 16 or maybe 24, 22, anyway. And this is a monophonic patch right now. But if I want to play chords, I can always turn the number of voices up. I'm Rob Outersect. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy playing this modeler as much as I have.